So welcome to Feature Fridays. My name is Guy Bartram. I'm the Director of Product Marketing for our cloud providers in VMware. And today I'm being joined by quite a few people. We've got Sangeeta, Kaushik, and Sashi. So thank you very much for joining, everyone. Let's start with a round of introductions. Sangeeta, why don't you go first?
Sure. Hi, I'm Sangeeta Panigrahi. I'm a product manager within the cloud provider group at VMware, and I majorly focus on app modernization and developer-ready cloud space.
Thank you, Sangeeta. And Kaushik.
Hi, everyone. Kaushik Chatterjee. I'm a director of product management for the VMware Marketplace and VMware Application Catalog.
Thanks a lot, Kaushik. And Sashi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sachi. I'm the technical product manager for our developer-ready cloud and Tanzu integration with VMware Cloud Director platform.
Thank you, Sashi. So today we're going to be talking about our newest release. I believe it's the newest release in the portfolio of application modernization technologies for our cloud providers, and that's the VMware Application Catalog. The Application Catalog is actually a really, really cool product, and I'm really excited to see this release for our cloud providers now. Today, we're going to discuss a little bit about what it is. We're going to discuss some of the use cases for cloud providers, and then Sashi's going to walk us through some of the aspects of the product live. So fantastic. Let's start with, can you give me, Sangeeta, let's start with you. Can you give me an overview of what the VMware Application Catalog is, or VAC as we call it?
Sure. I can take a stab at it, and maybe, Kaushik can pitch in later. So VMware Application Catalog, as I understand, is a custom selection of trusted prepackaged open source components that are continuously tested and continuously verified for production ready environments. Basically, if as a customer, let's say in the cloud provider angle, if a tenant actually has to use an open source component, they need not necessarily pull it, from maybe GitHub. It's always advised to actually use something that's tested, packaged, and in a production grade environment, not necessarily just in the dev and test. So this is the differentiation that VMware Application Catalog brings, basically from the usual open source components. So that's a huge value add both for providers and for tenants.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain amount of I guess risk with using open source components. You're kind of relying on the code chickens to be good and all of the inherited functions to be, legit and not, any particular malware or risks associated with that packaging. Kaushik, in your experience, have you seen the market change for this type of stuff? Because obviously, 5 years ago, it was all open source, and now are people kind of changing direction and starting to realize that for enterprise grade applications, there's a little bit more kind of wrapping that you need and a little bit more security?
Sure. So to answer the question, Guy, open source is a reality. The adoption of open source has not slowed down. But what you correctly pointed out is the fact that open source gives you the flexibility of choice, but it also kind of gives you exposure in areas that you've never thought about, as opposed to a commercial application, wherein the commercial provider of the application takes care of many things that don't come out of the box in open source. Now, what do I mean by that? Say, for example, you have open source running inside your actual production environment, which, by the way, is true for 99.9% of modern day workloads. You cannot but not have open source. The question then is, do you know the provenance of the data? What I mean by that is, do you know all the libraries that are running inside your open source software? Do you have visibility into your security footprint? Do you know the kind of vulnerabilities that exist? If, say, for example, there is a vulnerability, and if you're using an open source that's heavily used, and the committers are doing a commit upstream that remediates the vulnerability, are you sure of the fact that you have the latest version of that open source? Do you have, to your point, visibility into the malware that runs against it? So what it boils down to is basically visibility into what we call metadata. The bill of materials, the list of all the libraries that are running inside your open source, the security footprint in terms of the CVE IDs that may exist or may not exist, and the actual antivirus logs that you want to see when you run AV scan on top of the open source. This gives you the reliability or at least visibility. So what I'm trying to say is you need to be able to understand your security footprint. Now, open source is still going to be used. So how do you wrap, to your point, the enterprise grade features that comes with the commercial software around the flexibility of choice that open source gives you? That's where a product like VMware Application Catalog comes in. Now, you could do it for a couple of open source software yourself, as in, let's say, for example, you are using perhaps just Postgres and maybe Apache Kafka, then it is possible. But as you embrace open source and as the, I would say, the cornucopia of different open source software that you use inside your organization increases, you find more and more that in order to keep up with your security best practices, in order to ensure that you know what's running inside your production environment, you end up building a continuous pipeline that takes care of these things, because it's not enough to do it once and say I'm done. As soon as a new release comes out, you'll have to do the same. So where that leads to is a product like VMware Application Catalog, because in our opinion, to summarize it, most customers are more interested in enabling their developers to focus on building the applications that they need for their business purpose and enabling their security teams to be able to securely distribute open source inside their organization. In order to do both of them, we have a product called the VMware Application Catalog, which we will be happy to go through in detail today, that meets this niche. So it gives you the flexibility of choice which open source brings to you. It gives you the enterprise grade, I would say, security and the security posture that comes with the commercial software. So you get the best of both worlds. And VAC does this at scale across a broad portfolio of pretty much every single open source software that's heavily used. And just to sum it up, it picks up from Bitnami, which is one of the VMware acquisitions, which got a start packaging software. So the goodness of Bitnami packaged with the enterprise chops of VMware is what VMware Application Catalog is.
Yeah, I mean, you raised some really good points there. So when we look at the sheer proliferation of open source applications today, it is the de facto developer go-to, right, for their applications. They're not going to try and rebuild this open source application. They're just going to grab something that's available and use it. So when you say 99.8%, yeah, you're probably absolutely bang on, maybe a little bit more. The real threat then is that really by using open source and allowing development to open source, as you expand your application transformation strategy within your enterprise, the threat surface level becomes exponentially larger, because you're not just dealing with one particular application. You're dealing with one particular application, but hundreds of check-ins potentially every week to that application that requires updates and continual updates. And then when you've got 4 or 5 production applications, it becomes a real challenge then to try and actually change those and keep up with that level of iteration as you go forward. It's kind of like, it's not like the old, you'd have a gold build. If you were, a service provider, you'd have a lockdown build, which had all the ports turned off and everything. And that was a very static thing. Whereas this is a very, very fast evolving thing, which really represents a huge amount of risk. It's very easy for hackers malicious operators to take advantage of well-known and equally evolving vulnerabilities in open source. So I could see this would be a great addition to a service provider's portfolio, especially as they're kind of engaging in this app modernization strategy with their customers. Okay, so Sangeeta, you had a few slides to show. Do you want to walk us through some of the aspects of how VAC actually does this and how it works?
Sure. All right. So we can get started with just the basic definition. So Kaushik, do you want to take it away, and then I can pitch it with the cloud provider angle.
Absolutely. So if I had to quickly summarize back in one sentence, this is what you are seeing on the slide here. The VMware Application Catalog is a customizable selection of trusted prepackaged open source application components that are continuously maintained and verifiably tested for use in production environments. What I would like to do is call your attention to the callouts that are in blue font. What do we mean by customizable selection? VAC gives you the flexibility of choice. And that's what I meant initially when I said with open source, you also have you basically have a option to enable all kinds of different elements in your modern application. What I mean by that is, if you are going with a SQL environment, you could use Postgres, you could use MySQL. If you're using NoSQL, then you could use DocumentDB, you could use Mongo. If you're using caching, you could use Memcache, you could use Redis. If you're going with load balancers, you could use all kinds of, like, for example, you could use Nginx. The list goes on and on and on, right? If you're using messaging queues, you could go with, Kafka, and I know some people might disagree that Kafka can only be used as a messaging queue. How about RabbitMQ? You see, very soon you have a choice. How do you ensure that you standardize? And this is something that is key to pretty much every single solution architecture team within most companies. You want to standardize on the building blocks for your application. WAG gives you the capability for your administration, admin personnel, to be able to customize the basic building blocks that are in use in order to build those same applications by your developers. So if you implement WAC as a starting point of the pipeline, what you are guaranteed is your development teams will only use the components that you have enabled for use within your organization. That's what we mean by customizable, right?
Mm.
And I'll get into some details later on as to the next level of customization. So basically, you get to choose the open source software that runs inside your organization. The second thing, and this is very important, is you get to choose the base OS image that you may or may not have standardized on. I mean, yes, for dev test purposes, somebody can build a container on CentOS. Someone can build it on RHEL UBI 8 or 9. Somebody can build it on Ubuntu. Somebody can build it on perhaps a Photon, maybe even Alpine, although we don't support Alpine from a VMware standpoint. My point is, eventually you want to standardize, and this is something that we have seen in pretty much every single customer that we have worked with as far as VMware Applications Catalog is concerned. So they want to standardize on a single OS. And in many cases, they want to standardize the OS based upon their own individual needs. So WAG gives you the capability to even upload a base OS image that's applicable to your entire organization, on top of which you want to package the open source software. So that's the aspect of customization that WAG gives you out of the box. Now, what do we mean by continuously maintained? To your point, Guy, say, for example, take something like a Python. Python is a very heavily used open source package that is in pretty much all AI/ML environments, right?
Mm.
And I know it's used for other runtimes as well, but the Python runtime is specifically for data crunching, at least in my humble opinion. Now, if you go and look into the Python official repo, you will see multiple commits happening over a single week, sometimes in case of that, a single day. Now, how do you ensure that you are able to get the latest and greatest? Because often enough, these commits are major and minor releases. They are also remediations for known vulnerabilities. If you don't have VMware Application Catalog, you have to build your own pipeline to continuously go look at the upstream repo to check for any changes that has happened, and then as a part of that, be able to push it into your own environment. If you use VAC, this comes out of the box, right? Now that's the second part of it. The third part, verifiably tested, it means exactly what it says. Yes, for example, you have a container. If Kaushik goes and pulls a container image and makes some changes and pushes it into Docker Hub, there is no guarantee when you pull that container image from Docker Hub by a person called Kaushik, it's going to work, or you even know what's going on. So what we do when we offer these container images and the Helm charts as a part of WAG is we continuously test it in all the CNCF compliant Kubernetes distributions, whether it's VMware's own TKG, Tanzu Kubernetes Grid, whether it is EKS, whether it's GKE, or whether it's Rancher, right? Or sorry, OpenShift. Both of these, we basically keep on testing in all the CNCF compliant environments to be sure it works out of the box. This is what makes it enterprise grade. That's what I meant initially. You still get the choice that comes from open source, but you make it as enterprise grade as possible. Now, I would end with one item, which is, now while we do say that WAC enables you to get visibility into your security footprint, WAG basically augments your security practice. It does not replace your security practice. So using WAG, you'll be able to get to see what kind of CVEs exist inside the container image because it's packaged along with the metadata. Now, that is something that is very useful to your security teams because they can make a call whether this is something that they are able to live with, because it takes some time for a known CVE to be remediated upstream. Now, WAG does not remediate the CVE. That's a very important point. But as soon as it's remediated, within 24 hours or less, VAC will bring it to you. So you need to make a call as to whether or not you are okay with the security exposure. And we give you the CV in terms of the classification. That's something wherein we say we augment your security posture. We don't replace your security team, but we have seen that security teams really love VAC because it gives them out of the box the same things that takes a lot of time for them to do in a manual way. Now think about it at scale. Any modern day application will have thousands and thousands of containers that are created and destroyed as you basically scale in, scale out. We'll have at least 10 to 12 different open source software that you will use will be deployed in multiple clusters. When you think about it at scale, you realize the potential for using VAC because it offloads all this work. Our aim is to make the infrastructure invisible, and you focus on developer productivity and ensure that your developers are less interested in trying to figure out which version on which OS, on which open source component that we have to build. Just bind it into your application. The rest of this stuff is taken care of by step one in your pipeline, which is the VMware Application Catalog. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. So there's functional testing. There's also security testing that's done. Ultimately, though, when the customer the enterprise receives the updated application from VAC, they've still got to run their own functional tests on that, obviously, before they kind of push to production, right?
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Okay. So it augments the security posture. Yes.
Yeah, so it's doing more of the infrastructure pipeline activities rather than the actual code release activities.
That's correct. So you can hook up your own CI/CD pipeline. When I say your, as in the service provider, cloud provider CI/CD pipeline, you can use VAC as step one of that pipeline. And often enough, we have seen a lot of the customers who have installed VAC in production environments use VAC as step one. And I would like to call out that even VMware internal IT and all the applications that are currently running on VMware's cloud services internally use VAC as a way of building their base container images, because the point then is they don't have to build it. They get it out of the box in a way they want. In fact, VMware standardizes on Photon. So VMware IT has given us their own customized Photon OS instance on which we package the open source applications that they want to be used by developers in VMware for running all of VMware's IT applications. And thus VAC is the starting point in the build pipeline for all these applications. And that's something that we can, that's something that we do at scale. And that's something that we find a lot of our customers also do when they happen to implement VAC fully inside their production environment.
Got it. Yep, makes absolute sense. Okay, Sangeet, do you want to walk through the next slide? Yep.
Perhaps I can take a stab at that, and then I can hand it over to Sangeeta. So this one, I won't spend too much time on it. This is just a next level detail on the actual continuous pipeline that I mentioned, because sometimes it helps to visually see it. When we talk about the VMware Application Catalog, and we talk about that continuous pipeline that gives you those open source building blocks in a verifiable way, what do we really mean? So for example, you have open source. As you see on the top left, you have all the typical open source packages that you can think of. I have put a few of them in here: Jenkins, GitLab, Node.js, runtimes, databases like MySQL and so on, Postgres, Cassandra, Harbor. From a registry standpoint, there is a lot of them, and we can share the details of everything that's available. So basically, you have, this is the catalog, if you will, right? There is a choice that is there upstream. As I mentioned, the customization aspect of it. You probably are not going to use every single open source software that's available in the catalog inside your production environment. You would want to standardize, you would want to curate, right? Which is where the catalog comes in. You would want to curate and ensure that, say, for example, in my environment, for registries, I will use only Harbor. For databases which are relational, I will use only MySQL, right? For the purpose of CI/CD, I will use Jenkins. And for programming runtime, I will use Node. I'm just making up an example. You have other choices as well, but you probably don't want, and you could if you wanted to, but what we have seen is either companies have a set of programming runtimes, a set of caches, a set of databases, and so on. So you curate the open source components that you want from the catalog, you as in the admin, and then that's the only one that's available to your developers. This gives you the control over your environment as to the components that are there inside your modern day application, the building blocks, if you will, right? Now, once you have that, the build pipeline kicks in, and this pipeline is something that's automatic. What I mean by that is this is the pipeline that is basically at the core of the VMware Application Catalog. 24/7, day in and day out, once you have identified the components that you want made available to your developers, this pipeline runs in order to look at upstream open source repos to see if there is a commit that has happened, major, minor, or a vulnerability release because of a patch or a bug fix, what have you. And what it does is it takes the inputs that you have given it. I would want to package, say, for example, Node on top of CentOS, and then it runs, builds the container image, does the validation, which is ensures that it works with all the different CNCF compliant Kubernetes distributions, runs the scan to gives you the vulnerability information, runs the antivirus scan to give you the AV log, packages it along with the metadata, see that image and metadata line, and then pushes it into your repository, the repository of the cloud provider or the service provider in this case, from where your development pipelines will pick it up and deploy it into the platforms that you run containers on, whether it's VMware's on-prem, whether it's on Dell EMC, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, so on and so forth. All of these are supported as a part of the artifacts that VAC gives. Now, this is done at scale. So once you purchase VAC, you are assured that all the open source components that you have requested are continuously built, tested, validated, and deployed to your registry. Now, you have the choice to move from one version to the next, to your point, but you wouldn't have to go about looking for it. It's made available as soon as it's there in upstream, after it has been validated, tested, deployed, and checked on our side, so that you are good to go and you can bind it into your application and then promote it into your production environment, knowing fully your security footprint, knowing that it has been tested for any viruses, and knowing that it has been tested to work on the development platform of your choice. That's the pipeline that runs across all the open source that we support today in VAC, and we keep on adding to the catalog based upon requests from the customer and demand that we see in the field.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions here.
Sure.
First question is the build pipeline that you've got there, that is build pipeline that's happening on the service provider's kind of premise. But there's also a build pipeline that kind of needs to happen at the service that VAC provides in terms of all the testing and everything else that happens. Is that correct?
That is correct. So there is a actual build pipeline on the service provider side, which takes care of building the actual application, containerizing it, and then deploying it into their on-prem architecture. But the starting point to it, which is the containers and the Helm charts that they need to bind into their modern day application, that is output by the pipeline that you see here, which is part of the product itself, the VMware Application Catalog. Yes.
Okay, so is the product itself then, so there's kind of two sorts, I'm just thinking out loud here, there's probably two sorts of update. One is, what do you want to pull from the open source community, i.e. what OSS components do you want? And two, then there is I guess the updates to VAC in terms of what to scan, what to test for, and those type of updates relating to the whatever you're looking at.
Correct. So you set it once and then you forget about it. For example, you decide once the set of components that you want to be made available in your own registry. And of course, you can go and add components to it. Nobody's stopping you from doing it. But let's say, for example, you want a programming runtime, say Java. You want Nginx as a load balancer. You want MySQL as a database. You want Memcache as a caching option. And these are the 4 or 5 things that you want to make available to your developers. Let's start with these 4 or 5 things. You go once into the UI, and Sangeeta and Sachi will take you through the details of how to go about doing it. You select the open source applications that you want made available to your developers. After that, you don't have to do anything. All these steps that I just mentioned here on the slide, they are automatic. You hook up your registry, as in the registry that you would want the artifacts to be pushed into, the cloud provider, whether it's a GCR, whether it's a Harbor, whether it's a ACR, and very soon we will have support for ECR as well, right? And then this pipeline takes care of running it at scale and pushing the latest and greatest into your registry from where your own pipeline picks it up. That's how these two work hand in hand. And that's what I meant. That's what I meant when I said VAC is step 0 of your own build pipeline. Because if you think about your build pipeline, starting with pulling the artifacts from a registry for the components that you want to build, VAC's pipeline pushes the said artifacts into that registry.
Got it. Okay. And how kind of flexible is that in terms of the end push? Could that be a customer's registry? Could it be, does it have to be the service provider's registry, which he then provides different customers different levels of access to, or how does that work in terms of the flexibility there?
It could be both. It could be both scenarios. You could basically have one registry to rule them all, and then create namespaces for your individual tenants, in this case, the customers of the service provider. Or if you want to completely wall it off between each other, say, for example, we have a fictitious service provider X, and they have 3 customers, A, B, and C, you can add to the WAC pipeline 3 registries, one for A, one for B, one for C, and identify the components that you want to make available to A, B, and C. And then the pipeline will take only those components and push it into the corresponding registry. So it's a choice of both. We have seen both in effect, both on the customer side as well as with our direct customers. So it's totally implementation detail, and we support both environments. You can either go with a namespace approach, or you can have discrete registries that is basically at a per tenant level that you can hook up to the WAC product. And then that's where your tenants go and pick up the artifacts that's made available to them.
Okay. And I guess this then, I guess question to Sashi, right? So this then works with App Launchpad, and how App Launchpad can use a registry to kind of pull assets down and present those to tenants?
Yeah, as of now, App Launchpad supports Helm chart repos only. So as of now, while there is no direct integration, there is a other way we can consume these on the clusters directly. So as of now, that's the approach we will go forward with, and then we'll talk about like how it is planned out in coming slides.
Okay, cool. All right. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, this is the kind of the next slide I was going to go to then. So what does this really give a cloud provider in terms of, an advantage over using just off the shelf kind of open source?
All right. So I can just talk a bit on this. So, now we've established pretty well what's the core value proposition for VMware Application Catalog. So let's look at it slightly from the cloud provider angle, what value it brings to them, and why should they be interested in it? Why is it important to them? So let's just go methodically, left to right. So there was, I think, a 2021 study. It's called State of Software Supply Chain Report, and it said about 95% of enterprises use open source software. Of those, 94% apparently did admit that they have encountered security concerns using open source components in production. So if you're a cloud provider and you're actually currently providing OSS components to your customers, that is to your tenants, through various cloud marketplaces, then you may not really be able to address this pain, because the catalog of solutions which providers actually offer to their tenants may be best suited for development or test environments, as opposed to production grade or enterprise grade environments. But with VMware Application Catalog, we've extensively spoken, with the customizable, continuously verified, production ready open source images that it offers, cloud providers can quite comfortably address these security concerns, as well as cater to the business needs of their tenants who are using open source in production. Next one would be VAC or VMware Application Catalog. It sets the perfect avenue for a cloud provider to actually tap into the developer personas. So it very aptly enables them to capture a whole new segment of the market. So technically, it also serves as a new monetization source for them. VMware Application Catalog offers open source images, as it could be containers, Helm charts, and virtual machines that could be practically deployed anywhere. Meaning there is no lock-in or kind of hard requirement that all these active artifacts that are obtained through VAC need to be deployed just within or on VMware platforms only. They are delivered privately in a private repository, and they can be consumed and deployed to any platform of the tenant's choice. So, like the bullet rightly says, the provider can actually meet their customers where they are. And the last piece in here would be that, with VMware Application Catalog, providers that have tenants in highly regulated verticals, maybe financial services, banking, defense, healthcare, government, also all those industries which are highly regulated, they could serve them even better with all of these metadata that's packaged because it meets their highly stringent security and compliance needs. And that also does add a feather of cap on the service provider, sovereign cloud provider angle. So that's an important.
I think you raise an interesting point there. So lots of cloud providers, certainly in the VMware Cloud Provider Program, have come from like the hosting area, moved into offering cloud services and infrastructure as a service. Now they're starting to move into understanding how they can help their customers with app modernization. And obviously, if you're going to help them with actually doing the app modernization, or if you're going to help them by providing the platform they can run their modern apps on and the tooling that they'll need, two very different ends of the spectrum in terms of the resources that you would need inside the cloud provider to support the customer on those. But VAC nicely fits in kind of the ability to provide a solution to your customers which gets them closer to their goals. But equally, if that was the only thing you did, you're not going to need to have people skilled up in various technologies and app modernization kind of plays, because you could just offer this as a service essentially. And that's going to help you become more relevant with your customers. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, for cloud providers who haven't got those skills in developer-ready environments, this is a nice strategy for them to sell their customers something that is going to really help their customers, but also means they don't have to necessarily get involved too deep into the dev-ready solutions.
Perhaps this is also a good time to talk about air-gapped environment support.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so there's obviously a sync of the applications between the open source repositories and VAC, and then there's some sort of sync between, or pool, I'm hoping, between the on-premise VAC instance and VMware and the service that VMware is providing. What does that look like from a security perspective in terms of is it a push? Is it a pull? Is it a sync? Is it an open communication port all the time? How does that work?
Maybe I can take that on if it's okay with you, all of you. So that's a very good question, by the way. I think one of the key requirements that we often see is the so-called air-gapped environments. And to answer your last question first, if I may, it's always, in our experience, a pull as opposed to a push, because what we have found is the users who are operating in air-gapped environments want full control over their environment itself. They do not want the notion, no matter how secure it is, for somebody to be able to push content into their environment. So they want full control over when and where and how they pull the content in. Now the question then is the content that you pull in. Now, if I may abstract it to a higher level, think about, for example, a Helm chart, right? A Helm chart essentially is nothing more than a way of deploying software into your Kubernetes cluster. I know the maintainers of Helm might not like my, I would say, rather abstracted view of things, because it does a lot more than that. But at the core of it all, it does install software into your Kubernetes cluster, right? It deploys the container images. But how does it do it? Behind the scenes, what it does is, the moment you do a Helm install, it tries and goes and pulls the container image from the repository. See that statement that I made? It tries to go and pull the container image from the repository, implicitly indicates that it's trying to go somewhere else to pull it. Now, this is the kind of thing that is not allowed in an air-gapped environment. In the old days, say, for example, I need to deploy, say, a database. And the database, in order for it to install inside my machine, needs to go and pull some libraries, some binaries from the web. It's not going to work. So what you need is a way of packaging, if I may, all the dependencies into your Helm chart tarball, such that when the tarball gets pulled from the VAC instance on which you have the artifacts, that's all you need. when you do a Helm install, it doesn't try and go and pull something else from somewhere. So that kind of packaging all the dependencies into a single way, into a single file, such that you don't need any further, I would say, outbound calls, is what is needed for air-gapped environment. So what we do is in VAC, using one of the open source tools that VMware, and by the way, VMware is very much a contributor to many of the open source packages that are found within VAC, if I may say so myself, right? We have an open source tool, and we invite others to come and collaborate as well, that nicely and cleanly packages all these dependencies into a single tarball, which we then make available to you. And that's how you have full control. You get to decide which one of these different components you want to enable inside your environment. You get to package those dependencies yourself so that you have full knowledge into what's being done. And once all those dependencies are packaged into a tarball, you pull that tarball in at a time and place of your own choosing. So it will never be, I am asking you to open up a firewall or a NACL so that I can push it into your environment. It's always the other way around. So you pull it from us, you build all the dependencies into a single tarball, and thus it will run in an air-gapped environment. So that full control over what comes inside the perimeter, if you will, is then given to the customer. And the good part about it is you decide to do it once, and then that runs completely inside without the need for your container image to be pulled from some repo somewhere else. It's all inside your data center. And that's how you get to the true air-gapped use case.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how this works really nicely with highly regulated industries, like you've got on the slide there. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so so what sort of? Oh, okay, here we go.
Yeah, I was just coming to it. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I was going to say, so you've got obviously a lot of capability in there. I just want to also understand a little bit how we charge for VAC and for the service it provides. Mm-hmm. What are the kind of metrics there? But also, you've identified some really nice touch points here. What are the sort of people and personas that cloud providers need to focus this at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. So when it comes to pricing, so through cloud provider program, it's the team edition is basically offered, and there are two flavors to it. Providers could choose to purchase a prepaid VAC SKU that's for 12 months, and then they're just billed for the entire year, or they could do it monthly, which shows up on their monthly billing order, through their rental contract. They have both choices. And the way they get it is each pack comprises of 25 artifacts basically, and it has a max of up to 1,000 cumulative cores. So, but depending on whichever they exceed more than 25 artifacts or more than 1,000 cores, yeah, that's the max limit. That's how they can purchase VAC and use to be consumed.
Okay, that's a fair amount of cores, so I think we'll be fine with that.
Yeah. Coming to your question on the personas, so I think we did establish to some extent why providers really need VAC and what's the importance basically. They definitely want to pass all of these or some of these features or qualities that VAC has to their tenants and just see how it makes their lives easy. So I'm just gonna break it out into what tenant personas are. So let's switch gears from providers to tenants here. So let's break it into two broad personas. One says the operator persona, who basically looks into all of the security benchmarking requirements, and two is say a developer persona who builds applications basically. So let's say you talk to the operator persona. So he or she would be pretty keen to understand, say, with a certain open source component, how are we ensuring security policies are adhered to, that the item is free from vulnerabilities, complies with auditability and governance requirements. And as a provider, you would know the answer. VMware Application Catalog is trusted, meaning it has the CVE and antivirus scans, so it's secure, stable, auditable. It's continuously monitored for all the upstream code changes. So it can always trigger a rebuild, retest, and then push it out to the registry. it's production ready. That is, all the metadata is actually packaged in each package, so it gives visibility into all the open source licenses and the code provenance. So verifiably, the software complies with IT policies from a security and auditability standpoint. So the operator is happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you talk to a developer persona, he or she might be more interested to understand what it would mean for him or her to build applications faster, have more choice, more customization capabilities, and how they could quickly push those applications to productions. And the answer is still the same. So VMware Application Catalog offers curated, which means applications can be picked from or selected from the upstream repositories, and they have different choice of formats, containers, virtual machines. They can be customized, basically customized in the sense they have the choice of base OS images. They're not confined to just one. They could use VMware hardened Linux images, Ubuntu, Photon, CentOS, Debian, or they could bring their own pristine golden image. So that gives them the choice and flexibility that they're looking for. So if a provider actually had to pitch this, so they'd see it's a win-win for pretty much for them and both the personas that they cater to in their customers. So in summary, VAC actually offers developers the productivity or agility of prepackaged applications, while it also enables operators to meet the stringent transparency and security requirements.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, this is very much along the lines of kind of keeping a leash on your development, turning the Wild West into a civilized neighborhood and ensuring that everyone has got the correct charging port for their Teslas. It's really necessary for organizations to recognize that there is significant threat from running their core business applications on open source. And without this level of, I think it's fair to say, Kaushik, would you agree that what you're paying VMware for is it's not necessarily VAC the product, it's more like the service we're supplying here, which is something that we're scaled up to do, and we're doing it on behalf of thousands of enterprise customers. And that obviously is something that if you're an enterprise and try to do this yourself, well, you like you said, I think you might manage one or two applications, but as that scales up into production, then you're going to be in real trouble.
That's correct. Absolutely. I will quickly say this. You could do it yourself, but do you want to do? Because is this something that you would want to spend your time and effort on? Because this is an ever-growing field wherein there are new OSs being introduced into the catalog, new vulnerabilities that are coming up, different CV databases. Do you want to actually spend the time doing this, or do you want to outsource it to a company like VMware, which is specialized in doing these kind of things, which has the background to packaging software in the past? Like I said, it started off with Bitnami, and now we are putting the enterprise grade layer on top of it. So you can focus on developer productivity, which is your core area, and offsource this work to us. And that's where VMware Application Catalog shines. And I did see the transition you made there. In fact, I might steal it for my own presentations in the future. It brings you out from the wild, wild west of open source into the modern day Tesla charging environment, wherein you know that you're plugged into the right port and you're getting exactly what you're looking for. Perfect. Yep.
Excellent. All right. Okay. Anything else to add before we kind of switch gears a little bit and have a look at the solution itself? Is there anything else you want to cover before we go into the next level of detail?
Just a quick point on how providers could actually offer. So just to add to Kaushik's point, that they could actually choose to do a dedicated offering. So just provider could deploy just one instance, and it could be just one customer. Completely, customers could just tenants could actually do a self-service of the registry. They could completely manage that. That's fully dedicated maybe for large providers who probably do a lot of in-house development. Yeah, that could. Or of course could be in a regulator environment as well. The other one could be, the namespace approach that we just learned. That's basically for provider to actually offer it in a multi-tenant fashion. So it could be just one registry, and then they could have multiple tenants using the same thing. It's just that it will be managed by the provider themselves and not the tenants. That it's just to help our providers understand how they could deliver these. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, when the provider's looking at this, they've obviously got to take into consideration like the economic model. So you're buying a 25 application pack essentially, or 1,000 cores, whichever hits first. You're not obviously going to be selling all of those day one. So you're going to need to kind of think about your offering, ensure that you've got enough custom demand to kind of meet that onboarding curve that you'll have. And you kind of almost want to get into a situation where if you're looking at the multi-tenant world, you pick the most ubiquitous applications that you see amongst all your tenants, because you don't want to exceed that 25 too quickly before you got some volume behind you in any case. And what I'm trying to say, I guess, is you don't want to end up doing one-off kind of 5 or 10 applications for a tenant and run out of that 25 apps straight away.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let's switch gears, Sashi.
Yeah.
It's your time.
Sure. I'll share my screen.
Yeah, perfect. There you go.
All right. So right now I'm logged in as a cloud provider into my CSP account, where I can see the cloud marketplace service icon. Cloud provider can either access the marketplace by simple URL or the service itself. Once they have got the subscription or SKU for the VMware Application Catalog, we are going to see 2 extra tabs over here for configuring and the catalog tab. So once we go to the so without that, you would simply see this VMware Application Catalog, its overview and all the information, like whatever new content is coming up, you can see all the details over here. So whoever is starting off, it's a great source to get started with the stuff. And then to get started with a VMware Application Catalog, cloud provider can actually start creating a catalog. So over here, there is one catalog and there are a few applications added to this. The point of interest are for us is the images that we can see here. It has different states, right? Released and pending and things like that. So whatever says released over here, it is actually going to have all the scan reports, all the test results attached to it. So these things can be of interest to the person who is actually consuming the application or trying to insert this image into their pipeline. So they have so for record keeping, they can keep track of whatever reports we generate along with this can be used by that person. To consume this, you can actually simply use the Docker run, or you can actually use it from the registry itself. Now, provider's job is to actually maintain this catalog from which you're going to create different registries, one or more, depending on your use case. So here you can see we have all the types like container image, Helm chart, virtual machine, and so on. So, and from there, cloud provider is actually going to create registries. And to create a registry, you can actually provide 3 source of registry as of now. And like Kaushik said, ECR is on the way. So for our use case, you can add any registry over here and then share that link with your customer directly. So this is right over here, right? And if you want to look at the base images, so these are different base images for the containers, and to add a new base image, if you want, you can actually select the registry, get the custom base image, like we discussed, the golden image you want to add over here to get introduced into the pipeline. And
Sashi, can I just ask you a question here? So
yes, yeah,
you're logged into the VMware Cloud Marketplace, which is our SaaS solution.
yes.
Which and you've got to that via Cloud Partner Navigator.
No, actually, this requires the access through CSP, which is the cloud, the
Cloud
CSP
services platform.
cloud services platform. Thank you. Yeah, so this is the platform through which you access all the different cloud services as an enterprise customer. But for this specific WAC use case, you still require to use the CSP platform compared to Cloud Partner Navigator as of now.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
And in your example here, adding a registry. So this is obviously the SaaS solution, but we're adding a registry that's on premise in this example, right? So
yes. Yes. So this registry will be place where you are going to get all the artifacts from VMware Application Catalog, and then that registry will be the link to that registry will be your deliverable to your customer. So this service provides you all the details of all the images and way to manage your registry, but all the deliverables or all the images are going to be pulled from that registry to your customer.
If I may, a very simple way of looking at it, say Sachi is the cloud provider or the service provider. She has 3 customers, Kaushik, Guy, and Sangeeta, right? Kaushik, Guy, and Sangeeta, each of them have their own on-prem hosted registry. Let's say all 3 of us have Harbor instances. What Sachi will do as a cloud provider user is come here, attach, if you will, the hosted Harbor instances for all 3 of us into the output of the VMware Application Catalog pipeline, right? The one that you're seeing here. So what she will do is one for Kaushik, one for Guy, one for Sangeeta. And then Sachi, on behalf of all 3 of us, will identify the applications that we want packaged and pushed into our registry. Once she has done this one-time setup, and of course she can modify it. She can switch the registry URL. She can, let's say I decide to move from, say, hosted Harbor to ECR. I'm just making it up. Then she can, attach my ECR registry and so on. But typically these things are fairly static, not that dynamic. So she does the setup once, and then I, as the cloud provider, will see in my ECR instance all the artifacts that I have requested pop up over and over, on and on, and I don't have to do anything. Then, of course, I still have to do the actual work of building my applications, binding these container images into the applications, and then building a full-fledged container comprised of the application code and so on. But the base work, the starting point, which is basically the container image for my programming runtime built on a OS of my choice, with all the visibility that I need for the admins in my organization to see exactly what vulnerability exists, that has been somehow miraculously taken care of. That's how the process will work.
Okay, so I just want to understand this in concept of the air gap environment. So if I've got customers with high levels of security, they've got their own registry hosted by me on a server in their infrastructure. This would they then be able to call back to TAC and pull down the images that corresponded to them?
Yes, once you have attached or connected your hosted instance to us, that's the only work that you have to do. And we have the capability to ensure that we are able to check the heartbeat of the connectivity. Once you have attached it to us, then the rest of the work is done by the WAC pipeline, which continuously keeps on populating that hosted registry with artifacts that you have requested through the add new applications. And that is something that ideally the cloud provider will do for you as a part of the managed service offering that they're giving you, right? But as such, he will show you, if let's say, for example, you wanted to package Postgres on top of, I'm just making it up, CentOS, it literally takes a couple of clicks for you to do it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think from a security perspective. So you don't want that port open all the time. You want to be able to just kind of pull on a frequency that you want to pull. I guess there's various different ways that it could be done, right? With Bastion host and
So two
like
ways. So what
yeah.
you do is what you're referring to is basically a reverse proxy, right? So what you do is you create a registry. Say for example a ECR. I'm just making it up. Let's say you have a ECR registry instance created into which we populate the content. That's your ECR registry. After that, nobody has access to it. And your frequency of poll is something that you decide on your end. So basically, the registry that you attach to the VMware Application Catalog pipeline is basically the bastion host or the reverse proxy, if you will, that takes
Yeah.
care of this. And
Okay.
then you have full control over it. At a time of your choosing, at a duration of your choosing, at a place of your choosing, you pull the content, and nobody else has control over it because, again, it's your own registry, and that's the man in the middle, if you will, or perhaps that's a bad choice of words. That's the reverse
Yeah.
proxy in the middle that you have full control on. We don't have any control over it. We just populate the content.
Yeah. Got it. Okay, that makes sense. Cool.
Yeah, and to add a new application or create a new application with set of base image is also very simple. So we just navigated um, the catalog to just add a new application. So if you want to build a container image on specific platform, you can select that. And over there, you can select a set of applications that's available to be added. And then from there, you can simply add it to the, any registry. And then you create the name. And then that's about it. Just this is how you're going to just add in application to the catalog from which you can actually distribute it to different registries uh, for the customers. So managing the application, managing the request from the customers was like it's very simple and easy to consume for cloud providers, and customers are definitely are at the tail end of it, just getting the URL, and whatever request they have made is not going to they don't have to make any changes to their code where they are fetching the registry details from. So it's fairly simple.
And for those cloud providers who want the sophistication that typically comes along with automated pipelines, we do offer a CLI, which is basically, you see the UI is nothing but a thin layer sitting on top of the APIs. Those APIs are enabled through the CLI. So if you wanted to go through the work of adding an application, even through an automated process, never mind the frequency is very minimal, you could do that as well. So we do offer a CLI in case you want to fully automate the flow from the cloud provider side of the house.
Okay, and I guess just my last question. I remember at the beginning we said this is available in rental. Okay. Is this rental through an MSP contract, or is this rental is in product user guide rental points?
It's through product user guide rental points, actually, through a rental contract. So yeah, either they could prepay and or monthly. So it just shows on their monthly billing order as a separate line in their existing contract. So any provider who has an existing rental contract, the points just get added on there.
Yeah, and I think I saw in the UI there that Sashi had a view on how many cores and how many applications were being consumed. So that's all pretty easy from a monitoring perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Excellent. Well, look, I think that, unless there's any final words from my perspective, that's a great solution. Really interesting. I think this is going to really help our cloud providers. Again, what I'm kind of looking for is how can I just help them on their journey into an app modernization world and providing an armory of solutions. And this is definitely another bullet in the clip, so to speak. And it's going to help our cloud providers, have those more advanced conversations with their customers and have that more sticky portfolio, showing their integrity around security and compliance and capability in those domains.
And to add to this, Guy, I also want to point out that going forward, sometime in the future, we have it on our roadmap to actually integrate the VMware Application Catalog offering through App Launchpad. So the registries could be offered directly through ALP UI. It's on the roadmap. It will be coming soon. So it's a really good use case for providers who are already using App Launchpad. They're already used to that, and then once they see that we bring in back support as well, so that's going to make their lives even easier. It's going to be an easier sell for their tenants who are already accustomed to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. Well, listen, thank you so much, Sangeeta, Kaushik, and Sashi for kind of walking me through VAC today. I hope our partners find it as useful as I did. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I think I'm really super excited about this solution, see where it goes. And when App Launchpad support is there, I guess Sashi will be doing another walkthrough on the new capabilities in App Launchpad as well.
Yep.
Guys, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Thanks. Yep. Bye.
Bye now.